Deadpool is as hilarious as he is unstoppable. From his powers to his technology and the greatest weapon he has that the rest of the cast, main villains included, are completely missing. Hello everyone, welcome to Trick Theory. I'm your host Trick, cause I used to teach tricks on the side, tricking people into loving learning, because I'm really a scientist with an unhealthy obsession with how the nervous system learns new skills. And applying that background to Deadpool, stopping a rampaging Deadpool for good would be near impossible for most individuals and organizations across the MCU. And that difficulty has raised quite a bit now that Wade has come into contact with the Time Variance Authority, who, thanks to Loki, now stand watch over the multiverse and its various timelines. And from what we've seen, the TVA has to be up against a pretty serious threat to call on a lone Deadpool to solve their cosmic problem. Notably, when Deadpool asks the TVA why him, Mr. Paradox of the TVA replies,
"Wait, you are special."
And they're right, Deadpool is extremely special, more so than any other Marvel character, at least in the way he's referring. You see, in the end of Deadpool 2, we see Wade get his hands on Cable's wrist-mounted time travel device, and with a few alterations from Negasonic Teenage Warhead, Wade time jumps around with terrifying accuracy, saving his love Vanessa, killing his own variant from X-Men Origins Wolverine, stopping himself from making DC's Green Lantern, saving members of the X-Force, and making so many timeline changes across different timelines that he sure was to grab the attention of the TVA. A TVA who likely sees the potential in having a super healing mercenary that wants nothing more than to protect his friends of the 20th Century Fox timeline. But things obviously seem to go wrong, and the giant 20th Century Fox logo makes an appearance in what seems to be the Void, or the place where things and people from timelines that the TVA prunes from existence go to, and now Deadpool is fighting against the TVA. Story put aside, the key phrase along with Paradox telling him that
This is your chance to be a hero among heroes
is referencing something big that has been hinted at throughout the MCU and talked about in the TVA. So far in the MCU, we've heard about Nexus events, or points where events don't go the one and only way that they are meant to go. And now a new timeline starts emerging from the sacred timeline to exist alongside it, such as a new timeline where Loki escapes from the Avengers instead of being captured and sent to Asgard with Thor. And this new timeline will then branch off the original with both possibilities existing at once, which is where the good old TVA would come in and prune the variant timeline and individuals, sending them to the Void to be erased for good. The other hint we get at what Deadpool really is for the MCU actually comes from a fake commercial seen in WandaVision, where in a later episode we are introduced to something called Nexus antidepressants that are said to
a unique antidepressant that works to anchor you back to your reality, or the reality of your choice. Side effects include feeling your feelings, confronting your truth, seizing your destiny. Nexus. Because the world doesn't revolve around you, or does it?
And it's these symptoms and Wade's specialness that point to Wade being something the TVA calls a Nexus being. You see, Nexus beings are rare individuals who can affect the probability of a universe. They can make it so that certain events in a timeline will or will not happen, essentially allowing them to change the past, future, and alter the flow of the universal time stream. Even more so, these Nexus beings act as the keystones or the focal points of their universe, and thus are crucial to both the stability and coherence of the multiverse that Loki is holding in place. And you can bet that these special individuals are vigilantly watched by the TVA, and there is supposedly only one of them in each timeline. Currently, no Nexus beings include the version of Wanda that becomes the Scarlet Witch, King the Conqueror, versions of Mr. Fantastic, Jean Grey, Merlin, and Odin. What's common among these Nexus beings is that they all seem to be aware of the larger multiverse and variants of themselves existing, with them being able to change otherwise canon events. But it's among these Nexus beings that one stands out on top: Deadpool. He is the only Nexus being that not only knows that he exists on a timeline among many others, with variants of himself that he even kills, but unlike them, he also knows that he's in a movie made by 20th Century Fox. He knows about Disney as a company he breaks the fourth wall knowing an audience is watching him. He even knows about DC and the existence of characters like Batman and Superman. He knows more than any Nexus being out there, easily making him more unpredictable than Kang, than Wanda, in what he might do, what he might decide to change. He is Marvel Jesus. And now, beyond the katanas, Desert Eagles, grenades, he now has access to TVA levels of technology. Technology like the time-traveling Tempad. Sure, Wade has Cable's time-traveling watch, but it requires a finite amount of charges to work. And as Cable says, the farther you go back on the one timeline it's intended to keep you on, the less precise it becomes. As we see Cable jump back nearly a full 50 years, but he doesn't get to choose exactly where he comes out at. But now Wade is contracted by and surrounded by dozens of TVA agents who all have these temporal access devices that allow the user to monitor and jump to any exact point, desired location, individual on any timeline from anywhere, opening up a convenient time door for the user to simply step through, along with access to other fun technology. But that's really not what we're getting at here, because out of all of this, Wade's greatest asset by far also might be the best and only way for anyone to permanently take him down and win a Nobel Prize at the same time. And I mean Deadpool's healing factor. In fact, Deadpool's power has been referred to as being the opposite of Logan's in its nature. You see, Deadpool is what you would call a mutate, or someone who developed their powers after exposure to an outside stimulus that caused genetic changes to occur, while mutants are born with their mutations. And due to the surrounding circumstances that give some mutates their unique powers, and how their DNA reacts to the situation, it can make it more difficult to impossible to successfully duplicate a mutate's powers compared to that of a mutant's. Think of characters like the Hulk and his DNA relative She-Hulk, Spider-Man, and in this case, a stage 4 cancer, Wade Wilson, who after going through some very intense treatment, gained an incredibly powerful healing ability that is solely unique to him, to his cancer-infused body. A healing factor that constantly creates new healthy cells to counteract the cancerous cells that are killing him. Or does it? You see, Deadpool's healing factor, while keeping him alive, doesn't work like we've been led to believe. It's actually quite different. And it's this difference that presents anyone like a TVA or MCU looking to stop him with a definitive answer. To fully stop Deadpool, the best bet an individual or organization facing him has is to create the cure to cancer. It's more rare that an episode hits upon something that practically all of us agree is a really good thing, even after seeing firsthand how expensive research like this is. It luckily would be quite easy to administer to a dancing Deadpool via an army of goons armed with cancer-curing bullets. You see, to know how Deadpool's healing factor and his cancer are linked, we need to know that cancer essentially starts when a regular cell, going through its lifespan or cell cycle, ends up with a mutation in its DNA that either causes copies of certain instructions or the complete removal of others to occur. If these cells with messed up instructions begin growing and dividing instead of committing apoptosis or cell suicide, they are now cancerous. These cancerous cells also remain immature, as in they don't mature to carry out a specific job for the body. Yet these cells begin to grow in number until they form a clump or tumor. They duck the immune system from pruning them, ignore signals telling them they need to die, and they begin to take up resources like blood and oxygen. Then eventually, in Deadpool's case, the cancer can become invasive, spreading out to surrounding tissues and structures, as well as travel through the blood or lymph systems to other areas of the body. And it's here where Deadpool's healing factor comes in, or should I say, from. You see, as cancer spreads to other healthy tissues, the cancerous cells not only make an enzyme to produce their own blood vessels in a process called angiogenesis, but they also make larger amounts of an enzyme, possibly via their own white blood cells, that helps them break down healthy tissue and blood vessels. And they can even produce a substance to tell healthy cells to move out of the way so they can spread. And it's the latter two processes of breaking down and removing other cells that resulted in the traits of Deadpool's unique healing factor. But it goes much further than that. You see, whenever Deadpool gets an arm sliced off, his healing factor competes, or rather works, with his cancerous cells to regrow himself with enough functioning cells that he can still use his arm. And I really should say work with, because the entire reason Wade's healing factor can regrow his hand or lower body so fast, even more so than Logan's, is that Deadpool's healing factor grows, spreads his new tissue like cancer, because it is cancer, at least in its nature. In an issue called Black Panther vs. Deadpool #1, when shooting Wade with a special medical gun that preserves good tissue and destroys the bad, they were surprised to not only see Wade's entire arm come off, but his healing factor stopped working entirely. It was temporarily shut off, because his healing factor, or as the Black Panther family put it, dying factor, is like cancer. The tissue that Deadpool replaces isn't healthy tissue like Wolverine's, it's something of a cross between a working functioning tissue that is able to coexist with the cancer in his body and cancerous tissue itself, as it takes on the traits of his cancer cells of replication and growth. Sure, if you could summon a black hole or possibly drown Deadpool, the former would work while the latter would keep him suspended until he sensed the presence of oxygen, but by taking out what his healing factor is based on, what it is, you're guaranteed to land in a camp of one of three results. The first being that a TVA can keep their fingers crossed for is that by eliminating his cancer, you also eliminate his healing or dying factor that is basically a controlled cancer itself. The second and worst case scenario is that with the cancer gone, his healing factor adapts, mutates itself further, turning itself into another version of Wolverine's. But out of these three, it's the last one that seems likely if the first doesn't play itself out. With the cancerous tissue that was destroying his cells being eradicated, his healing factor now has nothing left to keep itself in check. And as the Skrulls who replicated his powers without the cancer to balance it out discovered, they and Deadpool would keep on making more and more tissue until they explode. Which is also why a Norman Osborn or Green/Gold Goblin keeps his engineered cure to cancer with him, just in case he needs to fend off a sneaking merc one night. But if none of this was very interesting, then I saved an interesting fact for last. In the end of the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer, we can see Wade land near a Secret War issue complete with Dr. Doom, hinting at the upcoming Avenger film, as we then see Wolverine extend his claws, with us going over the nifty science of how Wolverine's claws work in this video right here. So click on his glowing eyes in the remaining 3 seconds you got. Remember though, it's all a trick. See you in the next one.